Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of AV Career Masterminds. It is 2025, and we are excited to bring a new breath of information to you today. As you can see, I'm by myself. Some of the things that over the last couple of weeks I've dug into is actually an article that I read in the Business Journal that talks about illegal interview questions, which some of them I think are very obvious, which we know people, they shouldn't be asking you about your age when you come in there and you're filling out that application and putting that on your resume, and gender. But those kind of turn into sometimes apparent as soon as you sit in on an interview. But nowadays, we don't want to ask that question. So what I found interesting when I read this article was technically in about 20 different states, which we'll make sure that you can find out where some of that is, but in 20 different states in the US, it is illegal for the organization or whoever you're interviewing with to ask you about previous salary history. And I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. And, those are just kind of things they think that come up in an interview and in conversations about, what you may have made in the past and what some of your goals are and what you would like to make. And when you fill out those online applications and when you're going through the process, they always ask that, what kind of salary range do you want to be in? Which made me think, because depending on the state, if it's illegal to ask about his salary history. And when I was going through interviewing processes, a year ago, I basically knew what the pay for those jobs were going to be because of state, because of city, and because of cost of living, right? Every organization and every company has to figure that out. I mean, where I may get paid living in South Florida, might not be the same pay as living in the middle of Ohio by doing the same job, just because cost of living and inflation and all of those things are different. But in, as I said, about 20 states, they can't ask you about the previous salary history, which again, like I said, I thought is really, really interesting. So what do you do, right? What do you do when that question comes up if you don't want to answer it? Some of the things I've read said, just about, you're not comfortable answering that question. And, my previous salary history is not really relevant to the current position I'm applying for. And that might be the case, right? You could have been a CEO of an organization and you just decided that that was too much for you. You don't want all of that pressure. So you know what you're getting into when you're applying for a new position. You know what you're going to get into if you're going into sales or if you're going into middle management or whatever that may be. So what you made at the CEO, is probably not going to be the same as what you're going to make in sales. So why does that matter to a company? And when you look at that, why should it matter to a company if they were the CEO and now they don't want to be a CEO? They just, want to have less stress potentially, or just really enjoy getting out and selling a product to a company, or are extremely passionate about a vertical or an industry and they, just want to be able to travel and things like that. So, those shouldn't matter. Some of the other questions that can come up also that are illegal, especially as a female in a very male-dominated industry or in any industry at all, is asking about your family life. Shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter if you are a female who is married, who is not married, if you have 2 kids, 10 kids, no kids. Shouldn't matter if you decide that you, as a female in an industry, want to have children. That should not impact what your job is going to be, and it shouldn't matter. I'm a mom. And, I know that when I was doing some interviewing, that came up in the conversation. And I remember one specific instance when I was going through an interview process where I made a comment. I came out and made a comment about my son. And immediately the person interviewing me started to ask questions about how old was he, and travel, and how was I going to be able to, spend a week away and things like that. And it actually made me feel a little uncomfortable when I was in that interview, because I knew the needs of what the job was. I read the job description. I knew the organization. I had previously done some business with that organization. So I know and I knew what the job entailed, but I don't think it should have mattered if I had a son or I had a child, or I knew the job, and I had applied for it. And so for that person to come back and ask me all of those questions again, it made me feel very uncomfortable. And I wish I would have done a little bit of research, right, ahead of time, to understand what the laws in Florida were regarding questions that can be asked. And so as I was going through this and doing some digging and going down the rabbit hole of Copilot and finding out some websites and Googling, University of Cincinnati actually has a very interesting document that talks about the different states, the municipalities, whether it's going to be a county guideline, whether it's a full state guideline, and what industries it affects, which again, had no idea any of this is going on with any of the states. So you could take a look at that. It will tell you if it's a specific municipality, so a specific county or a specific city that has certain guidelines. Some of it might be federal agencies. They can't ask, doesn't matter what other industry you're in, but if you are part of a federal agency, they can't ask certain questions. If you are part of state agencies, they cannot ask certain questions. If you are a hiring, like recruiting kind of firm, you can't ask certain questions. So do take a look as you're going through the interviews and you're going through the interview process, kind of what some of the laws are about what organizations and employers are allowed to ask. And I do understand the hard part with companies, right? They are national type companies. They are global companies. You might be sitting with the regional manager, or you might be sitting with the manager covering like the East or covering the West or the Central, and they have multiple states that they're covering, and they may not live in the state that you live in. So, sometimes it is a little difficult for them. They need to be up to speed on all of the different laws, some of the questions that you're allowed to ask and questions you're not allowed to ask. So you can't put all of that on the person that's interviewing you, right? They have to be given this information, and hopefully that they are given those information. But I'm sure we've all sat through these interviews and there's been questions that come up. You may feel a comfort level with the person that you're interviewing with, or you may previously know the person that you're interviewing with, and you think some of these questions are okay to be answered. And you as the interviewee need to, kind of take that at your own discretion if you're okay with answering those questions, but do understand that there are some laws that back us as people that are looking for jobs, and understanding what can be asked and what can't be asked. And, some of the websites that I looked at gave you examples of how to respond, to those questions. Some of them, if they ask you if you have a disability, you don't have to answer that question, but you can respond with, per the job requirements, I am able to fulfill all of those job requirements. So, keep everything relative to what that specific job is that you're applying for, what that specific position is that you're applying for. Over the last couple months, I know that there are some organizations here within our beautiful AV industry that have unfortunately had to lay people off and let people go. And we are now seeing that turn again of more people in the industry looking and needing a job. So just kind of keep some of those things in mind. And they always talk about the interview questions, right? Prepare for the interview questions and being able to answer questions. But in all of those other articles that I've read about, what questions you should be prepared for and be able to answer, which are all those same interview questions we all know, those aren't talking about the ones that you shouldn't be answering, or the ones that are illegal to be asked during an interview, and how to respond to those. And just being able to say, look, I know this is not a question that can be asked here in the state of Florida or in the state of New York, or the state of California. Take your time, do some research to understand what some of those questions are that can and cannot be asked. So just a quick little episode here, guys. Just wanted to make sure that we understood this, that we are helping you all as you're going through this process in the AV industry looking for a job. Again, these are things that I didn't know, which I think are very beneficial to look and to understand. And if you've got any questions about some of those, let me know. And make sure to check out all of our amazing podcasts and our amazing series here on AVNation Media. And remember, we are all more than words.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.